In the wide and unforgiving Wyoming Territory of 1886, where the mountains rose like dark walls against the endless blue sky and the wind carried the smell of sagebrush across miles of open land, there lived a young cowboy named Cole Dawson, a handsome 27-year-old man with a strong body, sharp gray eyes, thick dark brown hair, and a crooked smile that had won him more trouble than friends. Cole was the only son of Samuel Dawson, one of the wealthiest ranchers in the territory, a stern and respected man who owned thousands of acres, hundreds of cattle, and the biggest ranch for miles around. But despite his father's wealth and reputation, Cole had become the greatest disappointment of his life. Cole was reckless, stubborn, lazy, and wild, spending his nights drinking in saloons, gambling away money, racing horses through town streets, getting into fights, and disappearing for days without telling anyone where he had gone. He had broken more than one woman's heart, insulted respectable men, challenged cowboys to pointless fights, and once nearly lost his father's best herd because he was too drunk to notice that a gate had been left open. Samuel had tried everything. He had taken away Cole's money, locked his liquor cabinet, threatened to send him away, made him work cattle from sunrise to sunset, and even hired an old ranch hand to keep an eye on him. But nothing changed. One cold morning, after Cole returned from town with a torn shirt, a bruised cheek, and a grin that showed he felt no shame at all, Samuel finally reached the end of his patience. Cole walked into the ranch house expecting breakfast, but instead found his father standing beside the fireplace with his arms crossed. "Where were you?" Samuel asked. Cole shrugged. "Somewhere more interesting than this house." Samuel's jaw tightened. "You are 27 years old, Cole. When are you planning to become a man?" Cole laughed. "I am a man. A man takes responsibility for his life," Samuel replied. "You take responsibility for nothing." Cole grabbed an apple from the table. "If you're finished preaching, I've got places to be." Samuel stepped in front of the door. "No, you don't." Cole looked at him suspiciously. "What does that mean?" "It means your life is changing today." Samuel walked toward his son and placed a small key on the table. "I have arranged for someone to come live here." Cole frowned. "Who?" "A young woman named Clara Whitmore." Cole almost choked on his apple. "A woman?" Samuel nodded. "She is 24, educated, hardworking, and capable. Her father died last winter, leaving her mother and two younger sisters with almost nothing. She knows ranch work, bookkeeping, cooking, horses, and livestock. She will manage the household accounts and help your motherless ranch stay organized." Cole grinned. "And what does that have to do with me?" Samuel's expression became harder. "Everything." Cole stared at him. "No. Yes. You cannot bring some woman here and expect me to behave." "I don't expect you to behave," Samuel said calmly. "I expect her to make you behave." Cole burst into laughter. "You have finally gone crazy." But 3 days later, a small wooden wagon stopped outside the Dawson Ranch house, and Clara Whitmore stepped down into the dust. She was not dressed like the fashionable women Cole had met in town. She wore a simple, deep green prairie dress with cream-colored cuffs, a brown wool shawl, sturdy leather boots, and a faded straw bonnet covering her long chestnut brown hair. Her face was gentle but serious, her eyes were clear hazel, and there was something quietly confident about the way she stood beneath the wide Wyoming sky. Samuel greeted her warmly, but Cole remained on the porch, leaning against a wooden post with his arms crossed. He looked at her from head to toe and smirked. "So you're the woman my father hired to save the ranch?" Clara looked at him calmly. "I'm here to work." "Same thing." She ignored his sarcasm. "Mr. Dawson, your father told me I would have a room in the house." "You can have mine," Cole said, with a grin. "I'm sure you'll enjoy it." Clara stared at him for a moment. "I don't think your room has been cleaned in years." Samuel coughed to hide a laugh. Cole's smile disappeared. That was the first time a woman had ever answered him without fear. From that day forward, Cole decided he would make Clara's life miserable. He hid her bonnet, put a saddle on the porch where she would trip over it, switched the labels on her accounting papers, left muddy boots outside her bedroom door, and deliberately rode his horse through the garden she had spent 2 days planting. Clara never screamed. She never cried. She simply looked at him with those calm hazel eyes and said, "Are you finished?" That question irritated him more than anger ever could. One afternoon, Cole deliberately brought a filthy horse into the stable Clara had just cleaned. She stared at him. "Why did you do that?" "Because I could." Clara picked up a brush. Then I suppose you can clean the stall. Cole laughed. You think I'm going to clean a horse stall? Clara handed him the brush. No. I think you're going to prove me wrong. Cole stared at the brush, then at her. You are a strange woman. And you're a childish man. He walked away laughing. But later that evening he secretly returned and cleaned the stall because he could not stand the thought of her believing she had won. The next morning Clara said nothing, but there was a tiny smile on her face. That smile bothered Cole all day. As weeks passed, his pranks became more elaborate. He tied a bell to her chair, replaced her tea with bitter coffee, and once sent her into the barn because he told her a calf was sick when there was nothing wrong with it. Clara eventually caught him in the act. She walked toward him holding the empty medicine bottle he had used as a joke. Cole. He froze. Yes. Do you ever get tired? Not particularly. You will. She walked away. He watched her go, strangely disappointed that she was not angry. The truth was that Cole had spent his whole life surrounded by people who either feared him, obeyed him, or laughed at everything he did because of his father's wealth. Clara did none of those things. She treated him like an ordinary man, and that frightened him more than he wanted to admit. One evening, a violent storm rolled over the ranch. The sky turned black, rain hammered the roof, and lightning struck the hills. One of the younger horses broke loose and ran toward the canyon. Cole immediately mounted his horse and rode after it. Clara saw him disappear into the storm and followed because she knew the canyon trail better than anyone. When Cole reached the edge of the ravine, his horse slipped on the wet ground. Cole fell hard and struck his shoulder against a rock. Clara found him minutes later. Cole, she shouted. He tried to stand. Go back. Not without you. I'm fine. You're bleeding. He looked down and realized blood was running from his temple. Clara helped him sit beneath an overhanging rock while the rain poured around them. For the first time, Cole saw fear in her eyes. Not fear of him, but fear for him. Why did you come after me? He asked quietly. Clara tore a strip from her shawl and pressed it against his wound. Because despite everything, I don't want you dead. Cole stared at her. Something changed inside him that night. After the storm passed, he began acting differently. Not perfectly, but differently. He stopped drinking during the week. He began waking before sunrise. He started helping with cattle instead of disappearing into town. When Clara struggled with a heavy sack of grain, he silently took it from her. When a fence broke, he repaired it before she could ask. When she planted a new garden, he built a proper wooden fence around it. Clara noticed every change, but said nothing. Cole began to discover that he enjoyed working beside her. They would ride together across the open range, sometimes without speaking, listening only to the sound of horses' hooves and the wind through the grass. He started asking her opinion about cattle, crops, and ranch business. She started trusting him with responsibilities. One afternoon, Clara found Cole teaching a group of ranch boys how to repair saddles. She stood at a distance, watching the man he was becoming. Samuel saw her expression and smiled. I told you she could do it. Clara shook her head. I haven't done anything. Samuel looked toward his son. You gave him a reason to want to change. But Cole's transformation did not happen without conflict. His old friends from town began mocking him. They called him the rancher's tame dog and laughed that a woman had finally put a rope around his neck. Cole ignored them at first, but one night one of them insulted Clara. Cole stood slowly from the saloon table. Say that again. The room became silent. His friend laughed. What happened to you, Cole? You used to enjoy a little trouble. Cole looked at him coldly. I still do. I just know what trouble is worth fighting for now. He walked away instead of starting a fight. That was the moment Samuel knew his son had truly changed. Months passed, and the ranch prospered. Clara's careful bookkeeping saved the Dawson family thousands of dollars. Cole became dependable, patient, and respected by the ranch hands. But there was one thing neither of them spoke about. They had fallen in love. Cole realized it first. He loved the way Clara tied her bonnet before riding, the way she smiled when the first flowers appeared in spring, the way she never judged him by the man he had been, and most of all, the way she believed he could become better even when he did not believe it himself. But he was afraid to tell her. He had spent years hurting people, and he feared Clara would never trust his feelings. One evening, they sat beside a small fire outside the ranch house while the sunset painted the mountains red. Cole finally spoke. Clara. She looked at him. Yes. He swallowed hard. I need to tell you something. She waited. When you first came here, I hated you. Clara smiled softly. I know. You drove me crazy. I know that too. He laughed nervously. But somewhere along the way, you became the person I look for every morning. Clara's smile faded into something more tender. Cole, I don't expect you to forgive everything I did. I don't expect you to forget the man I was. But I want you to know that I want to spend the rest of my life becoming the man you believed I could be. Clara looked at him for a long moment. I never wanted to change you, Cole. Then what did you want? She smiled. I wanted you to discover yourself. Cole lowered his eyes. And what if the man I discovered loves you? Clara's eyes filled with tears. Then perhaps he finally discovered the right thing. They did not rush into marriage. Clara wanted to be certain that Cole's change was real, and Cole understood. He continued working, continued helping his father, continued treating people with respect, and never returned to the reckless life he had once loved. 1 year later, on a bright spring morning, Cole rode into town wearing a clean dark brown vest over a white shirt, his boots polished, his hair neatly combed, and a simple silver watch in his pocket. Clara stood outside the church wearing a beautiful ivory prairie dress with delicate lace at the collar and her chestnut brown hair pinned beneath a cream bonnet. When Cole saw her, he smiled in a way nobody in town had ever seen before. Samuel stood beside him and whispered, "You finally grew up." Cole nodded. It took the right woman. Clara walked toward him, and when she reached his side, Cole took her hand gently. The wild cowboy who once believed freedom meant doing whatever he wanted had finally learned that real freedom meant becoming someone worthy of another person's trust. The boy his father had been desperate to save had become a man who could save others. Clara had never tamed Cole with force, money, or fear. She had changed him through patience, honesty, courage, and the simple decision to believe there was goodness inside him even when he tried his hardest to hide it. And as the church bells rang across the Wyoming Valley, Cole looked at the woman who had once been brought to the ranch to teach him responsibility and realized she had given him something far greater than discipline. She had given him a home, a purpose, and a love worth becoming a better man for.